we are going to have a computer crimes and forensic expert. He's going to go over cell phone data and computer-related investigations as it pertains to Stephan Sterns. It's tugging at our heartstrings, and I know that all of you out there are invested in justice for Madeline Soto. The path that he took, not only on the day of this alleged crime, but the days prior and the days leading up to that phone being taken into possession. It's important for police to put this roadmap together. The investigators want to know where his and her movements were, mom as well, and also the victim, because she had a cell phone that's alleged to have been left behind. All of the people who are around victimology. We talk about the family was there and all the people who are around. How important is that?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that really the smoking gun nowadays, the device, and the fact that we can recover, even if they do something like he did, a factory reset, we still have the transactions that are occurring on location through that device that are tied to the account itself. So whether he's on Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T, they are taking and recording those transactions that are happening from the GPS of the phone. We can still recover some things in a phone that's been wiped. And this is obviously where Anthony's going to have to shine, and I'll just back out of the picture. But we can gather that information, and then if they're dumb enough to have their stuff linked up to iCloud or to Google and having it saved to a drive somewhere, then law enforcement can subpoena those records as well and be able to extract the data that's found there. I'll pull the map up. I mean, a couple of things to think about, and Anthony, I would really love your impressions on this, but when we're looking at the map, I mean, this is where this guy is living, and we can pretty well say, hey, I took this child to school. So we map that out and go with some of the most likely ways that could have done that. We can get that path, and we can say, okay, it makes pretty good sense, even goes by that church. Isn't that just absolutely crazy talk that became part of his discussion point anyway, when you start looking at the area and the fact that, yeah, she's not walking over the top of these busy roads, but she's walking alongside them. Okay, there's a sidewalk there. We can start to evaluate and look at the area from a geographic perspective. And I saw a lot of news agencies that were saying there's no way she walked to school because of this freeway system going by. Well, that's not true. But the thing that's so interesting to me, Ron, is as we look at this, I wanted to bring in all the cell towers that happen to be in the area. So first and foremost, if we're thinking about data that's being recovered from her phone, this is the location of the cell towers. And when law enforcement's trying to get a good location on a phone, it happens by way of triangulation. So it might say, hey, this tower is pretty close to the home, and this tower is pretty close to the home. And if I triangulate a third tower, maybe this one, and that's kind of given me that certainty range. And if you think about your mobile device, if you went to the map on your mobile device, you'd see that your location is moving around like this as it's trying to figure out and bounce off of those towers and figure out where that device is located. Drifting, it's called cellular drift, as it's trying to figure out. And the worse the cell coverage is, the broader that area. And that's why you'll see a big area of certainty around your little dot on your phone when you're out in the woods or when you're downtown New York City and it's bouncing off buildings and trying to figure out where it is, or if you're in an area where it's better. So when you think about this, I want to keep that in mind. Now, what this area has is also a microwave system. So that really improves things quite a bit. But again, it's taking these systems and then taking satellites and saying, how is this device actually figuring out the location? So when law enforcement starts putting this together and they think, okay, here's the direction to the school, or here's the direction to the dump site, you have to start thinking about really what's the accuracy, availability based on the technology. But what it really does is it helps you impeach a predator who's saying, I was never over by Old Hickory Road, or I never went over here, or I drove her to the Methodist church and dropped her off so she could walk to school. Well, why doesn't your phone show that? Because at that same time, you were heading eastbound on this particular highway here, and we got you burned over here on this thing. That thing that the officer uses to twist them and say, I'm going to impeach you right now.
That's where you get them in the interview and interrogation right there with this data backing it up. They say, like, we know that he had a flat tire. There's a witness who saw him changing a flat tire. This is techno stuff that it's out of my pay grade.
In terms of cell phone towers, when I was in the police department, we had a whole unit dedicated towards tracking the cell phones, tower records, mapping those out, giving the investigator an indication of where that person was moving to from, based on the cell phone tower hits. And like Mike was describing, the accuracy of that type of data varies based on the connection type and how good the signal is, and whatnot, and also how spread apart things are. In a place like New York City, where you have so many cell phone towers to support so many people, the difference in terms of how close you could get to someone, there's more towers, so the vicinity. But then again, the amount of people within a certain tower at that point is going to be much more. With the GPS records, especially from a phone, there can be a wealth of knowledge. And like you said, the accuracy of that nowadays gets into the meters range. Investigators also need to be careful of is when they're doing a dump on a phone to ensure that the records that they're identifying as being GPS location data, in fact, is telling them where that person is and not necessarily some other location data. On your phone, for example, sometimes someone might take a picture and that picture might have geolocation data embedded in it. When the investigator is looking at it, they have to make sure that they can say that that picture was actually taken with that device and the metadata is not being carried over from another device that originally took the photo. And again, those investigators are going to be going through those devices, parsing them out for that geolocation information, just like I did in the police department and just like we do now.
Look, the bottom line here is we know that there's over 400 potential images and videos taken and extracted from his cellular device. There is no conversation about his laptop, if he had one, his desktop, his iPads, or any type of other electronic devices. We are now just hearing about cell phone device. The cell phone device that they got from him is alleged to have pictures that put his crimes inside that residence. And I think based on what you just said, Anthony, is some of these photos have embedded locations attached to it. And I see this in my own Google Cloud that I have. If I take a picture out in Northport and then I come back home or I go to the city and I look at that picture while I'm in the city, it's going to tell me that picture was taken in Northport. And it actually tells me where I was. Depending on the device, and I'm going to let you take this, how difficult or how easy is it for investigators? Now, I have some confirmation that he was on Verizon. And as we know, Verizon there's a law enforcement liaison attached to Verizon. I think most major carriers have that. We don't know if it's iOS or Android, but can you just talk a little bit about some of the techniques that are used to extract?
Sure, Ron. So whether it's on Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, the various different carriers that are out there, in terms of a forensic extraction of the physical device, doesn't really affect the outcome there for the most part. That said, in terms of a device where they are saying it was factory reset, it's not likely that a traditional extraction of the device would have recovered the evidence in the local storage on that device. So, for example, and based on different phones, make, models, and how that factory reset is performed and what's actually going on in the background, and not only the phone make and model, but also the operating system that's running on it. That said, most devices, the investigators nowadays, because in this digital world, there's different places you can go to get that data. So for example, if device happens to be an Android device, let's say the phone was factory reset, but the SD card that has the extra data in it that you can add more storage to, maybe that wasn't wiped, and that's where they're recovering the pictures and images. That would make sense, particularly if they don't have any other records from Stephan. So if they don't have the messages, if they don't have the phone call logs, if they don't have the data that's typically contained on the user partition, the operating system partition of the phone, it's likely that they might be getting the data from external storage that was plugged into the phone, or even a cloud backup for that matter. Nowadays, people like the convenience of backing up to the cloud. It makes things easy. When your phone dies and you need to recover it, or let's say you lose it and you need to get a new phone, you go right to the Apple store. You don't even need your old phone anymore. All you got to do is say, log into your iCloud and get the download of the backup of your data. So that's why I wanted, when we're talking about a phone when we're saying factory reset, specifically that. And
those were his words. Those were his words.
A factory reset, that tells me the data that was recovered likely was not from the memory on the physical device that ran the phone. It might have been an external micro SD card. It might be from the cloud. But
it makes me say to myself, Anthony, because images go back to 2019, it's far enough back that it could be argued that most of it, or the older stuff, was probably backed up into a cloud, because if you look at the newer phones, they don't even have SD cards anymore. Now, do you have any final thoughts as it pertains to forensics on this case?
The investigators involved in this, God bless them. At the end of the day, I'm confident that we'll get an answer, one way or the other, if the evidence exists.
And I feel strongly about that, because, a lot of people have the doubts. A lot of people say, well, since we're not hearing anything, we're not getting autopsy results, that they're dragging their feet. But that's why I keep trying to pound home, they're not dragging their feet. They're dotting their I's, they're crossing their T's.
They don't need to rush in this time. There's no need. Like you said, they got him on ice.
Madeline Soto, 13 years young. This is what this case is about. Justice for her, justice for her family, the ones who love her. Now, again, I don't want us point fingers at people, but we look at what we have and we send strength, prayers, and positive vibes to the detectives, the district attorneys, and everyone who has a hand in bringing justice for this girl. May she rest in peace, and may we get justice for her. On behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace, I want to wish you guys a good evening. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless.